Hello, and welcome to Nightmare Nate's Nighttime Showcase. I assume if you're watching this or clicked on this video, you probably know what diegetic means, but if you don't, use Google. No, but seriously, I think it's easiest to explain diegetics through example. Imagine any FPS where you get an ammo counter in the corner of your screen. That is considered non-diegetic. Now, imagine a game where your character actually looks inside of their gun to check how many bullets that they have left. That would be considered diegetic. Basically, it refers to mechanics in games that the characters are actually experiencing. And let me tell you, I absolutely love it when a game uses diegetic mechanics. It completely fascinates me. Usually something being diegetic or not is pretty normal. So much so that we don't even really think about it. Obviously, when watching a movie, we can naturally tell when things are diegetic or not. In a horror movie, when a monster pops out and they play a loud sound effect, we understand that the sound effect is being played to give us a little bit of an extra scare effect. But we also understand that the character in the story isn't actually hearing it. See, pretty common sense stuff. It's also the same when it comes to games. When we walk into a boss room, say in a game like Elden Ring, we obviously know the grandiose music to accompany the boss isn't actually happening. But there are times that making something diegetic when it normally isn't can be a really, really cool thing. Let's go back to my first example, ammo checking in FPS games. In most FPS games, knowing how much ammo you have left is undiegetic. And for the most part, I believe this makes sense. In a action-focused FPS, having a diegetic ammo system could possibly get in the way of a fast-paced combat experience. Imagine you're playing Doom and you're surrounded by a bunch of demons and your character just stops suddenly to pull out their ammo clip and count their ammo. I assume for most Doom fans that would not be a welcomed mechanic and it would make the experience pretty annoying, if not impossible. You're not playing a game like Call of Duty or Doom because you want to be fully immersed. Frankly, you just want to blow shit up. But in a survival horror game, having your ammo checking be diegetic absolutely slaps. And this, my friends, is what I'm talking about. Something so minor being diegetic can just add so much to a game. In this particular case with Amnesia the Bunker, not only does it add to your immersion, which is important in a game where the purpose of the game is to scare you. And for that to happen, generally, you have to be immersed. If you can disconnect yourself easily from the game, it makes being scared harder. So most horror games try to have you immersed. The realer the situations feel, the more likely you are to be sucked in. This is conducive to fear. So adding little diegetic things like that can really help your game be just that much more effective. And since we're on the topic of horror, and this is also the nighttime showcase, let's talk about my other favorite diegetic mechanics in horror games. Shit, RE7, man. I could talk about Resident Evil 7 for forever. It might just be my favorite game ever. Well, it goes back in between the Dark Souls franchise and the Resident Evil franchise. You know, the main ones being RE7 and DS3. You know, every day it's a coin flip. You know, I'm always changing my mind. But anyways, more on Dark Souls later. So, in RE7, the way you check your health status is diegetic. In RE7, when Ethan, the protagonist, is yoinked by the Bakers after having his mutated wife chainsaw his hand off, he awakens with it reattached. This time with a fancy new little Fitbit. This shows Ethan his vital signs, which translates to you, the player, knowing how much HP you have left. Now, I know I'm going to say this for every one of these, but it's this small little thing, being diegetic, just does so much for my enjoyment and immersion. Your health being diegetic is just so cool. It's something that you don't even think about twice, like, I'm gonna put a health bar on the screen so the player knows how much HP they have left. But this being actually, like, explained in the lore and have it make sense in the world is just... Gameplay wise, it just adds to the tension. Getting into a scuffle with Jack or the Molded to quickly check to see if you can take 2 or maybe just only 1 more hit left before you die. And before you say it, I know you other horror fans are sitting there thinking, well, Dead Space did diegetic health and horror first. This is true. And let me be clear, I love Dead Space and I love Isaac's spine health bar as well, and I think it's awesome. But where you can always observe that HP bar on his back while you play, I found it to be a weaker example, because in Dead Space, there's not the element of the diegetic health bar being used as a in-the-moment tension-building mechanic like with an RE7. It's generally like purely used for immersion in that game. Next up, we have Silent Hill 2. The radio in Silent Hill 2 is absolutely iconic. Again, this is a thing where it's like in most situations, there's no reason for a mechanic like this to be diegetic. But yet again, in a horror context, it rocks. So basically after James gets done boinking a little goober, he finds a radio. And this radio plays a static frequency whenever there's an enemy nearby. Every time when you enter a room and you hear this, you are clenching your cheeks, at least for a while first. Feel free to tell me why you might disagree with what I'm about to say here. Sorry for the tangent, by the way. But I feel as if this mechanic is a double-edged sword. Early in the game, it's anxiety-inducing, and you're fumbling with the controls to deal with the threat, which, granted, is awesome. But eventually, you learn whenever you hear that static, you just have to hold L1, and James will auto-lock onto the threat, so you wait and blast away. So, in a way, not having the static mechanic could be argued to be more effective. Without the static, you see, you don't have that build-up panic with an encounter, but at least it wouldn't make encounters later on so predictable. But with it, you have the panic, vice versa. But now, back on topic. The static being something that James, as well as you experience, connects and grips you with his panic, which is way better than just having some icon just pop up on your screen, or the static just having no explanation. As I'm sure you'll see with all of these, I think for the most part, if you can have the option to make a mechanic be explainable, it just does nothing but improve the vibes of your work. So, to wrap up this discussion on one more example in horror, let's talk about the king of diegetic mechanics in horror, Outlast. Now, to kind of clarify my stance on horror games in general, first, I would like to say that out of all the games I'm talking about, Outlast is probably my least favorite. But that doesn't mean that I hate it. I enjoyed Outlast 1 and 2. I'm just under that mindset that I don't find non-combat horror games as effective as something like a survival horror game. But that'll be a topic probably for another video. But regardless of my feelings on walking simulator-esque horror games, you cannot deny Outlast's commitment to diegetic immersion. It is absolutely seeped within the game. It's not just like a one-off mechanic like with Ethan's wristband or James's radio. I think it's clear that making the game wholly diegetic was very intentional. Outlast 2, specifically, in my opinion, perfecting how well you can integrate a fully diegetic experience. Fun game. Take a shot every time I've said diegetic in this video. You'll be dead by tomorrow. In Outlast 2, there is not to my knowledge, a single non-diegetic mechanic in the gameplay. From the way you heal, look at your inventory, read documents, you find, analyze old footage that you take while playing the game. It turns Outlast into this seamless nightmare thrill ride you can just get sucked into. Now, granted, Outlast has an easier time at achieving this due to its relatively bare-bone mechanics of running and hiding. I mean, to be honest, to even call it survival horror like the devs claim it is a gross stretch, but I digress. Props where props are due. At this point in the video, I think I've explained my ideas pretty well and expressed my thoughts and feelings to the extent that I intended. I'm still going to ramble about Dark Souls. Just think about every game ever. What results in dying in a game, lore-wise, for the character? Obviously, you start back unexplained at a checkpoint. Just common sense. So much so that it's ingrained in our gamer branding and memes. Let me clarify. This is fine for most every game. I'm not disparaging this or any game that does this. We are meant to suspend our disbelief when we mess up and get a game over. We concede that this is just a necessary thing for video games to do so that they can operate. And again, I think that this being non-diegetic is usually fine. Not every story can accommodate a diegetic way to integrate a basic mechanic like a game over. In any game based in actual realism, it's borderline impossible. But on the flip side, when a game can manage to do it, I absolutely love it. Dark Souls does it and does it well. Now, to my knowledge, I believe that BioShock was the first kind of game to do this with the Revita Chamber, but I feel like Dark Souls does it better. Not only is it a diegetic death mechanic, but it helps connect and legitimize other diegetic mechanics, such as your healing. This is the first time I'll ever say this unironically. Thank you, Miyazaki. The bonfire is so successful, it literally affected dying mechanics in the gaming industry since. In the world of Dark Souls, when you die, your character actually dies and actually respawns. Your playable character and other NPCs are actually experiencing death and resurrection, consistent with the lore. The characters in Dark Souls are locked into this vicious curse that puts them into this cycle of a kind of immortality, where they are destined to die and resurrect over and over again, until somebody can usurp the power of the gods and sacrifice themselves as a fuel to the flame that the gods created so that this curse can subside and life can go back to normal. Prepare to Cry Edition 400. So when you die in-game, your guy is actually like, he felt that shit. And they come back to your last checkpoint, the bonfire, which is basically like a little beacon of the flame's power to carry out the purpose of continuing the flame. The first time I played Dark Souls and realized this, it blew my mind. It was at that exact moment that I realized how special Dark Souls was. Dark Souls is the king of integrating lore and gameplay in a meaningful way that creates the most engaging experience I have ever felt in a video game. It is the definition of peak. Even something like how you communicate with other players or online play is diegetic, and it's beautiful. You know, on the online, instead of just having a messaging board that is obviously non-diegetic, your character is actually leaving messages in the world for other players to see, like through magical items that they find. Or when you summon another player into your world to play co-op with you, it's, explained as, in the world of Dark Souls, time is like convoluted and people from different dimensions are kind of phasing in and out of the world. So when you summon somebody to play co-op with you in Dark Souls, your character, like in lore, is actually summoning a spirit of another player to come help them explore the world. Online communication in a game, just like death, is something that any normal dev would look at and be like, of course, there's no way that we could make this diegetic. Miyazaki thought otherwise, and to me, it's this commitment to diegetic mechanics that set the Soul series so far apart from the rest of the industry. and I hope I continue to see more elaborate and awesome diegetic mechanics in the future. Anyways, thank you for listening to me ramble about the things that I love. I'll see you in the next one.